Hi, thanks everyone for coming to vBrownBag session today. I'm going to talk about VMware Cloud Foundation architecture. If you have any follow-up questions, we'll take it offline since I have to finish my slideware in about 15 minutes. So with that said, you must have seen about VMware approach towards VMware Cloud Foundation in various sessions, general sessions. It's a unified SDDC platform which allows you to have on-prem cloud based on compute, network, and storage, along with an ability to scale your on-prem cloud to public cloud very easily, which allows you to have unified platform, whether it's on-prem or off-prem. You don't have to spend time and money training your own people if you want to move it into a public cloud. So that gives you kind of unified, integrated approach for VMware Cloud Foundation using various options on top of it, like cloud native applications, traditional applications, business critical applications, and things like that. So there are two components of VMware Cloud Foundation. It's a prescriptive approach, right? So we want to make sure that you are successful. The issue that you normally get into that you are customizing all your environment, right from hardware to storage to networking to the hypervisor, even to the operating systems, right? So operating system you do understand, but as and when you have more manual interventions, you kind of get into some issues, right? It's a fat fingering of some commands. If you place some .19 instead of that, if you put .18, it kind of gives you a problem for the rest of the things that you need to resolve. So we want to make sure that right from hardware to the software at the infrastructure level, we give a prescription, which means that it's a combination of not only the software, but also a combination of hardware that we are prescribed to, right? It is based off of vSAN nodes, some switches in the environment, and of course VMware product, as I mentioned earlier. So let us look at various hardware components that they have in the mix. Definitely, we would like to make sure that there is a redundancy in the environment from the hardware perspective. So your power has redundancy from stack, rack, as well as from the server itself, going into the vSAN ready nodes that we have. We can start with minimum 4 nodes, as you probably are aware of. If you are going with the VX rack SDDC, then 8 node is a minimum to start with. Top of the rack switches, again, we got to have 2 of them to make sure that there is a level of redundancy built into the top of the rack switches. And as well as if you're going beyond the racks, beyond one rack, then definitely you need to have a spine to have the internet connectivity between these 2 racks. So in short, I have a rack configuration in front of you. Starting with rack number 1, at the bottom you can see management domain, which is my management cluster that I kind of bring up as a part of my VMware Cloud Foundation initial bring up process. And on top of that, I can start consuming various nodes, vSAN ready nodes, one after another by carving out my various domains. In this example, you can see a virtual infrastructure as a service, as a domain that is created as a VI domain. And the bottom, you can see a VDI domain that you can create. And what are those things that we can just have a little bit more detail in few slides. But this gives you an understanding of what the configuration from the rack perspective. To start with the rack 1, you don't have to have all 32 nodes, but you can start with 4 or 8, and then you grow up and grow into the multi-racks, right? So you can expand up to 8 racks as of now. This is what we have tested, which gives you about 256 hosts in a given environment managed by one SDDC instance. If you want to have beyond 8 rack scalability, if you have a spine with more capacity, then we have no issues to support that. Software will just work fine. So let us look at a little bit more about physical architecture. If you look at the previous slide, there was some at the top of the rack switches. We had management switch as a fixed architecture wise. So just wanted to give more detail about how those are basically connected to each other, what we call from VMware Cloud Foundation perspective as a wire map. So we are very, very prescriptive. We want to make sure that you do not fail, you do not have any issues when you are basically building up the environment, right from racking, stacking, powering them up, right? So we want to make sure that a specific cable goes from port 1 to port 36 for my host, right? So I have redundancy for the two top of the rack switches. Management switch will get connected, how my spine switches are connected, how my uplink to the data center is connected, what ports that I'm going to use it. So when you come to us, we know exactly where and what went wrong, and we can make you things corrected really quickly, right? So we looked at physical components from rack perspective, from physical components, physical architecture, networking perspective. The next is basically talking about software components, right? So what are the various components that you saw in the first slide that are there in this particular approach from VMware Cloud Foundation perspective? And I get this slide will give you an idea about, it's a unified platform. It has some of the integrated components, now the external integrations that are there. If you look at the bottom, I have physical hardware, ready nodes with some switching technology in the architecture used. On top of that, I have VMware Cloud Foundation, which comprises of vSphere, NSX, as well as virtual SAN to deliver as a foundation for my cloud. And also a key component which is called SDDC Manager. It is a core engine of my VMware Cloud Foundation instance. So when you are looking at Cloud Foundation, it's going to go deploy all these components in an automated way, right? So you provide some initial information about your IP space, all those configuration details. Once you are done, VMware Cloud Foundation will deploy all these components seamlessly without any manual intervention. On top of that, as of now, we have Horizon Suite with additional licensing. But entire Horizon Suite, if you talk about the connection server and all those view server, view composer, and all those things are deployed in a reference validated architecture way for you without any manual intervention again. To bring your view desktop infrastructure up, it takes about 3 to 4 hours for you to see exactly the power of VMware Cloud Foundation. That's where we are minimizing the manual errors. We are trying to make sure that you have validated design which is deployed on behalf of you, rather than spending time and money on architecting and designing various products that VMware has, right? And also on top of that, as of now, we have vRealize automation that you can install, configure manually, right? And it's kind of being in the works that will take care of in an auto deploy fashion as well. Because if you talk about VRA, it takes about 17 to 18 virtual machines to be deployed in a highly distributed, highly available kind of architecture, right? So we will be coming up with that external integration into an integrated approach pretty soon. But it gives you an ability to start consuming an infrastructure that you lay it out for your business. So we want to make sure that you target, you focus, and work with your customers or work with your business to look at their various aspects of business challenges by providing a solution fairly quickly. So integrated components, as of today, Log Insight is by default for the management stack that we deliver, just to make sure that Log Insight will carry forward into a compute workload as well, that you can have an extensibility of your Log Insight. Again, for the Log Insight, if you are familiar, we have content packs for various aspects of monitoring it. So we configure those content packs automatically. You do not have to configure anything separately. You can just start consuming and using Log Insight right away. Same thing for vRealize operations. At this moment with version 2.2, it's manual, but next release you will see that it is auto-deployed in a fashion that you have seen, like a master node, as well as master node has its replica and couple of collector as well, which allows you to really look at and start utilizing vRealize operations from day one. If you are familiar with various management packs from VROps perspective, they are installed, configured, and integrated with Log Insight to make sure that you can see the dashboard right away and start consuming, start using the environment from alerting and monitoring perspective fairly quickly. So I think I touched upon this in a couple of previous slides. So it's a combination. If you look at this slide more closely, you will see on the back there are 3 racks, right? So it's a consolidated, aggregated pool of resources brought together using VMware Cloud Foundation, and you can slice and dice the way you want it in the terms of workload domains. There are two types of workload domains, or three types. One is the management workload domain, which is deployed at the time of when I'm trying to bring up my instance, my SDDC environment. It is delivered, which is typical like your management cluster actually. And then there are other two, virtual infrastructure, which is my typically infrastructure as a service cluster or workload domain, and virtual desktop infrastructure I just briefly explained about. It will deliver it to you, an entire VDI architecture to consume your VDI for your environments. Multiple workload domains runs in parallel. They are kind of isolated from each other. Each of them comes with a dedicated virtual center server, and since NSX is a part of it, NSX is also delivered per virtual center server, which means each workload domain has its own NSX manager, right? But all those components, like for workload domain, in this example, virtual desktop workload domain will have its own virtual center server and NSX manager. We host them under management cluster just to make sure that all the management components are hosted in a management workload domain, but the NSX controllers will be deployed close to the cluster, so they will be running on VDI or virtual desktop cluster itself. This is typical standard best practice that we have seen and you have seen coming in from NSBU. So fairly quickly, just want to touch upon what are the various components that you would expect when we deliver management workload domain. You are familiar with most of them. A couple of them that you are not familiar that I will focus on. For example, SDDC manager, utility, and control. So these are the utility virtual machines or appliances delivered as a part of VMware Cloud Foundation, which allows me to have an auto deploy of the entire stack in few hours, as well as lifecycle management, which is a key part of my infrastructure moving forward as a day-to operations. Again, if I look at it, how do I create a workload domain? This is a UI typically that you will see from SDDC manager perspective. It gives you a prompt saying that, hey, you want to create a VDI workload domain or VI workload domain. And if you look at the screen more closely, it gives you overall idea about what are the physical resources, what are the number of workload domains that I'm running, and what's the compute power that I have at my disposal. And it's very fairly simple that you can create either a VI or VDI workload domain fairly quickly with a click of a button, and it will deploy your PSC, virtual center server, vSAN, NSX, which are common, and it will be utilizing common SSO as a part of my single instance of VCF. Again, it gives you an ability to add, expand, delete your each and every workload domain through this particular interface. So kind of going a little bit more deeper onto the workload domains. If you look at the screen, there is a workload domain 1 and 2 kind of tied to my management cluster, PSC, virtual center server, NSX manager, vRealize operations, log insight. So these are the critical components for my management cluster, which are common and they are hosted into my management cluster. And also, if you look at workload domain 1 and 2, they have their own virtual center server, NSX manager, but they are deployed into management cluster. They are not running into the workload domain 1 and 2. What we are running is controller 1, 2, and 3 inside the cluster, right? So PSC is redundant and it's common into my entire instance. I do not have PSC deployed per workload domain, right? Because it's a common shared for my entire instance of VMware Cloud Foundation, as well as my vRealize operations. There is no point in deploying vRealize operations per workload domain because it's a single instance. I want to have the entire vRealize operations as a part of my single pane of glass to look at each and every workload domain, what's going on, and get alerts accordingly. And this is last but not least, just want to spend a few seconds on this about lifecycle management. So we have taken the next leap, like making sure that a lot of customers have come to us saying that, hey, you have so many products, but when it comes to patching or upgrade, we don't know what the dependencies are. We spend time. By default, everyone will log in on hardware compatibility list and look at what is compatible, where it's compatible, and how I'm going to go take next steps, right? So we have automated that. You don't need to worry about doing any homework. We do that on behalf of VCF. We verify all the dependencies and we ship you that ISO. ISO could be a big ISO comprises of all the products updates and patching, or it could be a smaller one, maybe just NSX patches, it could be just vSphere patches, right? But we test, we validate, and we ship it to you, which you can schedule, download, and basically make sure that it is working offline when you are not babysitting that particular environment. And I think with that said, I'll just go fairly quickly on this screen, which talks about you can schedule, you can manage those patches offline or online. You can download, you can schedule the patches or upgrades, and it will patch and upgrade automatically per workload domain as per your need.